kind of monies that are earned by the executives are too high, but the real farmers get so little. I hope your committee could help this country get involved with this matter so that people don't. You remember in this period, Madam Speaker, maybe just mention it, that a young boy lost his life in this last week because of farmers are demonstrating for their rights. I wish we would not have a situation where farmers demonstrate for Kenyans to notice that they are doing a good job and they deserve a good payment. Thank you.
Member for Kitutu Masaba, Honorable Clive Kisiaro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would like to thank the two members who brought this issue up. Madam Speaker, I come from Nyamira County, where almost 70% of the population rely on tea farming as our own and main cash crop. Madam Speaker, it is somehow comical that the farmers who wake up early in the morning work for nothing, while a few people who sit in offices, be it in Nairobi, around the factories, and the auction points in Mombasa, are the ones who rake millions of shillings. Madam Speaker, tea is auctioned using the dollar denomination. The farmer is never, ever informed about the forex. All we see year in, year out is the bonus rate coming down or stagnating. The farmer will still get the same amount from the time the dollar was exchanging at 90 shillings. Today, the dollar gyrates between 120 and 130. But the farmer will still get 20 to 30 shillings per kilo. We can't have a system that is there to ensure the poor remains poor, and the rich who do the least rake millions. It is painful. And as this House, we need to come up with ways to ensure that we protect the farmer, that the tea benefits the poorest person, to ensure they're able to take their kids to school, to ensure they're able to feed their children. We have a responsibility. We cannot sit and wish that the farmers have a better day tomorrow without us doing something. And let this be a wake-up call to KTDA. We are watching, and we will not sit and watch and do nothing while you make our people, the people who are the backbone of this nation, continue to die in poverty. Yet they work, they toil every single day, hoping for a better future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Nairobi County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you look at how this country started from independence with cooperatives and institutions to manage our agriculture, coordinate, export, and give value. I mean, in the past, people used to send their children to school without any problems because they made so much money. The gold of our country was agriculture, coffee, tea. Kenya is the third largest producer of tea after China and India. Though we only have the variety of black tea, I think we need to really improve the variety of teas based on the demands in the world. But the biggest problem we're having is if you've received the tea and you have sold the tea, it shouldn't take this long for you to actually give the money to the farmers. And I think this lack of transparency in terms of how much money they've received, the efficiency of remitting the money to the farmers, how much money are they retaining for themselves as the institution that's actually like the trading house. I feel that as long as we don't make it beneficial for farmers to actually make money, what is going to happen to the tea industry is what we saw happening in the coffee industry. In the end, people were uprooting their coffee trees because they found there was no value. And this is an actual export earner for the country, import earner for the export earner for the country. So what we need to do is the Ministry of Agriculture to really agriculture to really come clean. I'm sure the Office of the Auditor General has already made reports on certain issues that are arising in these various institutions that manage our agriculture. And if these reports are not taken seriously and acted on, then we have a problem. I think we have a vicious circle of wrongs, and we need to try and turn that if we're going to turn the wheels of our country and our economy to be actually prosperous. So the Ministry of Agriculture should actually take note that this is a big concern, because this is an income earner for the country. This is also an industry that is supporting a lot of our people. And right now, the last thing we need is to lose any gain that we've made that is positive. We need to actually work on the negatives, and there are far too many. So the agriculture industry needs to be watched properly. And I pray that we will see some action within the next few days. And we cannot pay the farmers less. We cannot charge the farmers more and then expect them to actually be able to continue making that investment. We have a tendency to respect foreign investors and actually fail to respect our local investors. That tea farmer, even if he has 10 bushes, he is somebody that is worthy of respect, because once he sells it, right, to the trading house, that trading house brings in dollars for this country, which help us to be able to pay our debts. So we need to be able to actually pay our farmers on time, pay them their rightful dues. And I really want to thank our honorable member for bringing up this question, because it is important for us to address it. Thank you.
Thank you. The member for Uasin Gishu County.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to speak about this topic that I'm extremely passionate about. I think as members of parliament, we must first start to stop lamenting and act, because the only place where the action can happen is here in parliament. We can pass the necessary laws and regulations to ensure that our farmers are protected. And it's not just the coffee and tea farmers, it is farming across the sector. If you look at our history from the time of independence, the whole entire farming industry has been on a decline consistently. There is no time that it's been on an up climb. And you ask yourselves as Kenyans that you see tea in Europe that's called English tea, yet there isn't a single plantation of tea in Europe or England. That English tea is Kenyan tea. You go around the whole of America and Europe too, you find Starbucks selling coffee, yet they don't have a single plantation of coffee. There is something wrong with us as a country. The education that has been invested by government hasn't helped us, because we should have changed that trajectory at that time. We must, and I'm asking the agriculture chairperson, you must spearhead this if you truly want to be worth that seat that you are given by Kenyans. That you must engage with the ministry and stakeholders and find ways of turning this around, so that any tea that's being sold abroad is called Kenyan tea and not English tea, because the plantations are ours. We also, because we have continued to behave like we are being colonized. Yes, during colonial times, that was okay, because during colonial times, they were growing the tea here and taking it to their country and calling it English tea, because we are a British protectorate. But we are not a British protectorate or colony anymore. So we must start first by even changing the name of the tea. If you look at what the food production that we used to have, we used to produce sufficient rice, we used to produce sufficient palm oil, sufficient coconut oil, sufficient wheat, sufficient sugar, sufficient maize. But today, we are net importers of all those crops that we are capable of growing. So I think we must interrogate ourselves, and we must fault ourselves as members of parliament. It is not the job of the farmer to resolve that issue. It is our job. We must tell ourselves, the counties, agriculture is devolved. how much are the counties putting in ensuring that they maximize rice production so that our supermarkets are not filled by imported rice? Our supermarkets are not filled with imported meat, imported edible oil, imported palm oil, and things that we are capable of producing. Even imported nuts that we are capable of producing, yet we have the land and the labor. So unless we act as parliament, Kenya will always remain poor, and Kenya will always be a net importer of food that they can produce. And remember, those countries don't have the labor force that we have. So it's about time that we start to look inward instead of speaking like somebody else will resolve it. When I hear about a simple problem, like the tea is taken to a selling point, and the person who determines the quality of the tea is a third party, how difficult is it for the counties to make sure that they have an independent body, not the broker and the purchase of the tea, to just be able to measure the quality? That doesn't take a lot of equipment and doesn't cost a lot. It is a failure of ourselves as the leaders of this country. And with that, Honorable Speaker, I thank you.
The member for Bobasi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to second the motion as brought about, the petition as brought about by the petitioner regarding tea growing, and particularly the disparity in the tea bonuses in the various regions. I speak as a grower of tea, actually, in a small scale way. And I have witnessed, I can tell you, that the amount of money you spend into the tea in experience and the amount you get, you actually end up earning less than what you have spent in growing the tea. And therefore, this petition must not only call for a simple comment, but an interrogation on how is it that, tea is being grown and we give it out to people to market, and then the amount coming back is so differs from one area to another, and the market we are selling, the marketing system is the same. So something must be terribly wrong. And so, we call upon also the regulatory system of the government to ensure that the farmer is protected by getting his due share. But on another comment, there are, and it's heading there are many products we used to produce as a country which are no longer being done. If the tea also continues like this, because I've seen it as I grow, the number of people growing tea is going to reduce because they are not getting any benefit, and we are going to lose that industry as another. So we must protect the tea, we must protect the farmer so that we benefit from it, we use it to, the farmer uses it to pay school fees for his children, and as a country, it helps us to get income. It's important to take it at parliament level and at regulatory level. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly on this would be the member for South Imenti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this important agenda. Mr. Speaker, agriculture sector is very, very important in this country. And the economy of this country is driven by agriculture. Mr. Speaker, having been a director of Imenti factory, I wish to contribute and state that tea currently is the main cash crop of this country. And we find that farmers are not benefiting considering to the river they exhibit in their farming. Mr. Speaker, we find that there are so many middlemen in the sector. And you find that at the end of the day, farmers are not getting enough revenue or returns. Mr. Speaker, when we consider the inputs, especially that the farmers use like fertilizers, the labor in harvesting does not tally to the returns that they get, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's our responsibility to see that farmers are well paid, especially by adding value addition in the tea in our factories. So, Mr. Speaker, the payments vary differently for various factories, but they are, or the tea is sold in the same market. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish to contribute and concur with my fellow honorable members that the intermediaries that are in between the farmers and the market should be reduced. Payment should also be done at the right time when the farmers expect the payments. Mr. Speaker, it's our responsibility to see that the farmers benefit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, before we move to the next order, join me in welcoming students from Masinde Muliro University, Kakamega County, Brook Hill Academy from Wakasi East, Nairobi County, and students from Githuguchu Primary School, Daragwa, in Nyandarua County. They are seated at the public gallery, and they are welcome for our proceedings this morning at Parliament. Next order.
Order number 8, motion number 24 of 2023, policy and funding for sugarcane farming in the country. Resumption of debate.
All members, debate on this motion had started with the motion being moved and seconded and a number of members contributing. At the time of closing last time, the floor on this motion was Honorable Ruth Odinga, Kisumu County. She's the House. It's not. So, yeah, would I see by interventions members who want to contribute to this motion? The motion is on the policy and funding of the sugarcane farming in the country. Members want to contribute to this? Please press the intervention button. Let me start with the member for Nairobi County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this motion on policy and funding for sugarcane farming in the country, brought by Honorable Peter Nabulindo. Mr. Speaker, I mean, we looked at the tea industry, and as our Deputy Speaker rightly said, it's agriculture as a whole. Here we come up with a motion on sugarcane farming. It is such a shame that we have let this industry be riddled with corruption, and the big names that were actually responsible for bringing down institutions like Mumia still walk free. And, you know, we continue trying to bail it out, one in and out, and we're not getting anywhere. And then the people that trade on sugar, the people that want to import sugar, majority of whom are probably in government as well, are continuously dumping sugar from other countries. What we have to remember is when we import any product that we can produce and have been producing 600,000 metric tons, and we drop it down to 300,000, and then we say there's a sugar shortage, and then we issue permits, and then sugar is brought in, and then we are consuming sugar that is imported. This is actually so morally wrong, because we have farmers, we have land, we have factories, but we are actually mismanaging our own and then going and out and becoming traders. And then what we do when we become traders in any industry that where we can actually be able to produce, right? When we become traders, we are actually creating jobs in the countries that we are importing from. And it is so shameful that we can do that. All those people that are waiting for a sugar shortage to be declared so that we can get licenses to import sugar are actually killing the jobs. They're the reason why we move from 600,000 metric tons to 300,000 metric tons. We need to get it up there again. We need to go to 1 million tons. We need to have vision. We need to have ambition. We need to be able to actually protect our own. When we create jobs in Kenya, we employ our own citizens. Sugar in Kenya, I mean, I have had sugar in other countries. The sugar in Kenya tastes better than any other country. Its sweetness is right up there. We have a lot that we can do. Even we can produce our own ethanol. But the question is, we don't have the will to do right by Kenya. And I really hope that we can do right by the sugar industry because we have made it ill for so many, many years. And I think it starts with actually dealing with the corruption that brought down the sugar industry. Because if we don't deal with the corruption that brought down the sugar industry, then we're not going to be able to actually forge ahead. Because our history determines our future. And when we let people get away with doing wrong, then again, we're going to end up doing wrong even today. So while we put all the policies, all the structures, all the legislation, all the budgets, and we keep bailing out industries that people have stolen from, and they're walking scot-free and hoping to one day come back and lead this country, I really think we are losing the plot. And the plot is founded in our national anthem, where our national, the freedom fighters of this country, what did they want? They wanted prosperity. They wanted peace in our land. We will not have peace when our land and our sugarcane growers are not able to profit from their hard work. So we need to start thinking, how are we going to produce that sugar? Let's not be so quick to give licenses to import sugar for the shortfall. Let us give incentives to make sure that our industry, our sugar industry grows. Let us put the right structures in place. Because if we don't, one industry has to win. Unfortunately, it's almost like we have a collapse in every sector of the economy. And this collapse has been gradual and it's growing. And I really pray that, with the vision that I believe that the president has for this country and with the broad-based government, we will prove that we can actually change the direction that we're going. Because the direction that we've been going has been backward. Can we change that direction and go forward? Instead of going down, can we go up? As a country, we owe it to the citizens as leaders. And this is everywhere. This is not just parliament. This is also the executive. The executive has to do it. Parliament has to oversight. Budgets have to be provided. The citizens have to pay their taxes. The judiciary has to allow us to work. We've become a country that is continuously stopped from moving forward because of litigation. We need to somehow come together and decide what is good for Kenya. And what is good for Kenya is good for the citizens. And I believe that, sometimes we're pitted against each other and we lose the plot. The duty that we have as citizens and as leaders in all three arms of government is to steer Kenya in the right direction, because the citizens want that. The citizens need that. The citizens are begging us to do that. So sugar industry is just one industry, but every sector of this country requires us to shift from doing things the old way to a new way, to doing things the devil's way to doing it the godly way. We're building churches, mosques, temples, but we've morally lost the plot. We are nowhere. I mean, I think if heaven were going to take a census, very few Kenyans would be there. So we need to start doing things right. And I really thank the member for bringing this, and I hope that the Ministry of Agriculture will do the right thing by the industry of sugar. No more importation. Let's get our metric tons up. Let's boost our industries. Let's get our factories working. And if we can't do it ourselves, let's bring in the public-private partnerships that can steer the industry in the right direction. Because you know what? Sometimes if we can't do it, let's get out of the kitchen and bring in the chef that can actually cook the dish that all Kenyans would want to enjoy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So thank you. Mvuriri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this motion brought by Honorable Nabulindo. Mr. Speaker, sugar remains one of the goods in this country whose supply is lower than the demand. Basic economics tells you where the supply is lower than the demand, the pricing must be right. Yet, we still have our farmers choking because of importation of sugar. Before we even introduce new policies, Mr. Speaker, I think it's a matter of goodwill. It's not for lack of policy, but it is purely goodwill. Ask yourself, when sugarcane is actually being produced, I come from a sugarcane growing area, there is generation of electricity. That electricity in most factories is more than enough for their own factory that they can be able to supply it to the grid at a much cheaper price. Then you find one of the policies is like a case that happened in Mumias. They were producing power. They were forced to sell all that power at a cheaper rate to KPLC and buy it at a much higher rate. So they're producing their own power. They are not allowed by law to utilize it. They are supposed to send it to the grid and buy it at a higher rate. It simply does not make sense. Every single year, we create an artificial shortage. We license a few people. We give them the opportunity to go and import. When they bring it here, the pricing is not right. So I actually want to support this bill, this motion, that the government, if they are keen on improving the livelihoods, especially from Kenyans who are living in sugarcane growing areas, that we must begin to invest, including in the maintenance of the factories that we have. Most of the factories that are producing below capacity is because the machinery that we have are as old as this nation. For example, in Sony Sugar, I think that machine was bought way before independence. They're still struggling with it. So you find it is operating at about 50% or less. There are issues of regulations. Every other time we try to bring in proper regulations here, they are frustrated by the same government. And it's the same cartels that are actually going around. So I want to applaud my colleague who has brought on this motion, that indeed it is about time that we make this country more independent and every single region be looked at for its uniqueness. For sugarcane growing areas, the investment that they require, amongst many other things. If we invest in sugarcane, for example, in my area, I have seen the sugar factories. They fix our roads, they fix the infrastructure. So it means if we allow them to produce to capacity and stop the importation, they get the right pricing. It will even reduce the amount of money that the government still invests through Ministry of Roads to improve the infrastructure, building bridges and things like that. Some of us are who we are today because of sugarcane growing. I personally went to school because of sugarcane. In fact, that time, as long as you had the cane on your farm, you would simply walk to the factory and they'd give you authority to go and pick money from the bank and have the sugarcane in the farm as a guarantee to ensure that you are educated. Some of us would not be here today. So I think I want to support this, that indeed it is about the time the House completely resolves that the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock put money where it actually should be. I beg to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Wanyonyi, you want to contribute to this? Honorable Tim Wanyonyi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the sugar industry in this country has actually brought people to abject poverty. Factories, Mr. Speaker, they ceased to pay farmers many years ago, and they have sugarcane on the farms rotting away, or sugarcane delivered at the factories and they are never paid. We have a big problem, Mr. Speaker, especially in the Western and Nyanza region. Nzoia Sugar Factory, Mumias Sugar Factory, these factories were functioning, Mr. Speaker, and those days when they were paying farmers and people were thriving, you could see even in the markets and everywhere was doing very well. But there came a group of conmen, Mr. Speaker, the middlemen. They are the ones now who interfered with the sugar industry they started negotiating things that did not exist and made sure that the factories were paying them and not the farmers. So, Mr. Speaker, we believe that the other thing is that the government and political interference also, Mr. Speaker, dealt a big blow to these factories because over and over they will, Mr. Speaker, fire competent managers and hire political managers who come in who have no idea how to manage the factory and going forward. I remember there was a man who was functioning in Nzoia, Mr. Speaker. When he was there for a short period, factory started paying farmers on time, and the factory now they were milling and then selling sugar. And then the political interference came about because people wanted to recruit a local person who had no idea to manage the factory, Mr. Speaker. And that brought a lot of problems. And up to now, I don't think these factories will ever be revived. There's no, even the government keep on pumping money there, it's just a waste of time. We better find a solution, a lasting solution to these factories, either, and we passed a bill here, Mr. Speaker, to privatize and hand over these factories to strategic partners who can bring in money and revive the factories. The way West Kenya is functioning, the way Butali is functioning, these two factories, Mr. Speaker, have no sugarcane farms, but they are milling and they are getting sugarcane from all over the place, and they get and pay the farmers directly. And that is, Mr. Speaker, that is where we find that this thing going on in the Mumias, Shuka, Nzoia, and others, Sony. We have find the factories suffering because of this, Mr. Speaker. And for us moving forward, I think the government should just get out of the sugar industry and sell all the shares to a private, to a strategic partner who can now come with the money, invest, and improve the factories, and then, Mr. Speaker, revive them and they'll start working. There are people who are ready and willing, but sometimes the negotiation takes long and take a wrong turn because there are people demanding for kickbacks before even putting pen to paper. So this is something that also, Mr. Speaker, has brought a lot of problems. And this is, we have not had these problems in the coffee, tea sector, because there, Mr. Speaker, they are very, very well managed. And you find that farmers are directly involved in the management of the factories, but you find the sugar, Mr. Speaker, the political appointees and all those people who come without any knowledge of how to manage a factory, they run them down, and this is something that we need to look at, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much for giving me a chance also to contribute on this.
Thank you. Honorable Zamzam.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika, na mimi niweze kuongezea katika mjadala huu wa leo. Wakulima wengi wamekosa ile ari ya kuweza kurudi mashambani kulima, Mheshimiwa Spika, na ndio maana tunasema wapewe nafasi katika kuweza kupeleka mambo ya factory ya miwa ili waweze kuangalia haki yao, Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, wakipewa mwanya huu wataweza kukaa pamoja na wale wahusika wakaweza kujua haki zao za kimsingi, haki zao za ukulima, haki zao za miwa na upanzi wa miwa unaangaliwa vizuri na mazao yakitoka pia wanapata faida nzuri, Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, ukiangalia makampuni mengi ya sukari yamefungwa kwa sababu wenyewe kwanza walikuwa hawana mwongozo mzuri katika zile factory zao, na kulikuwa na utepetevu mkubwa sana, na wengi walikuwa wakinyanyasa wakulima. Ndio maana unaona wakulima walirudi nyuma, Mheshimiwa Spika, wakaweza kuacha kupanda miwa, Mheshimiwa Spika, na ndio maana factory nyingi ukapata zimefunga. Lakini mimi nataka kusema hivi, mkulima yoyote, si wa miwa tu, hata Mombasa, Mheshimiwa Spika, sisi tuna wale ambao wanapanda korosho, na tungeomba serikali vile inavyosukuma sehemu zingine katika ukulima, tunawaunga mkono, lakini tunasema pia wasiangalie sehemu moja tu. Mimi kama Mama Zamzam na support wakulima wa sukari, na ningeomba pia mkulima wangu wa korosho, mkulima wangu wa nazi, naye pia aweze kuangaliwa, kwa sababu zote zinaleta rasilimali katika Kenya. Na ukiangalia ukulima kama wa nazi, Mheshimiwa Spika, nazi zatolewa nje kutoka India, kutoka China, sisi tuzitumia wakati kuna ukulima ndani ya taifa letu. Ni kwa sababu hawaangaliwi, hawashughulikiwi, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hiyo mimi nataka niseme, ndugu yangu Naburindo, asanti kuleta mjadala huu wa kuweza kutetea ukulima wa sukari, na tujue pia hawa wenye factory wanatengeza pesa nzuri sana, waweze kutoa mafunzo kwa hawa wakulima, waweze kuwasaidia, waweze kushirikiana na wao kwa ukaribu, ndio mkulima ataelewa kuwa mazao yangu nikitoa, nikipeleka kweli, hakika kile ninachostahili kupata ni hiki, na kitanipa moyo wa kuweza kuzidi kupanda miwa na kuweza kulima miwa, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hiyo mimi namuunga mkono ndugu yangu, na nasema wakulima wote Kenya, na nimeona kuna mswada ambao utakuja hapa, Mheshimiwa Spika, sikupenda kujadili saizi, lakini ningependa kusema hivi. Kenya iko katika hali ngumu sana, Mheshimiwa Spika, na sisi tunaangalia sehemu ambazo zinazalisha, tunataka kuzalisha. Kwa hiyo masuala ya kuweza kumfinya yule mkulima, sijui leseni ya hii, mtu yuko kule chini anapambana na mbolea, anapambana na mambo mengi, waachie wakulima waweze kupanda bila kudaiwa maleseni na nini, tuweze kuzalisha. Uchumi ukishashika vizuri, Mheshimiwa Spika, sasa tuweza kuzungumza masuala ya kugusa huku na huku, lakini kwa sasa wakulima wako chini, wanastahili kupewa boost na serikali, wanastahili kuangaliwa masuala yao, kwa sababu hao ndo wanalisha taifa hili, Mheshimiwa Spika. Tutaweza kuzuia zile sukari zinatoka sijui Brazil, zingine zilikuja na sumu, zingine sijui zilikuja na nini ndani. Tutaweza kuzuia ikiwa tutampatia huyu mkulima nguvu ya kuweza kulima na aone mazao yake na apate kufaidi kwa mazao yake, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hiyo mimi naunga mjadala huu. Asante sana.
Order.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I raise understanding order number 5. Honorable Speaker, having heard the mood of the House and the overwhelming support that this motion has received, and the very pertinent issues raised by the motion, Honorable Speaker, and that we all agree, Honorable Speaker, I want to ask that understanding order number 5, that the mover be called upon to reply, Honorable Speaker.
Is that the mood of the House? The Honorable Nabulindo, the chance to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank all the honorable members who have diligently contributed to this motion with a lot of passion and a lot of insights to whatever was on the floor of the House. Mr. Speaker, the House has had a lot of facts and issues arising from the sugarcane industry, generally the sugarcane farming, growing, processing, and sale of sugar in Kenya. I would like to thank the following members who diligently contributed to this motion. Shortly, Honorable Undo, Kaluma, Dawood, Keinan, Okello, Kihara, Omondi, and all the others who contributed in today's motion. Mr. Speaker, I will not go into much details because members have really talked well. They have come up very strongly in support of the issues that actually this motion seeks to achieve. And one of the speakers today, Honorable Member for Nairobi, Mheshimiwa Pasaris, said that the problem, and I totally agree with her, the problem we have in this country with the sugar industry is cartels. Mr. Speaker, for a very long time, since the early 90s up to today, cartels have been ruling the sugar industry unabated. And it seems like they are above the law. The government cannot do anything about the sugar cartels. And maybe the biggest problem with that issue of cartels is because the people who are running these cartels are actually in the government. They fight to be in the government so that they can control these businesses. Mr. Speaker, you are my neighbor, and you know very well, since the collapse of the sugar industry, very many people, in fact, millions of people have sunk into poverty. Millions of people have sunk into poverty, and therefore, it is time that as a country and as a House of Parliament, we need to do something about the suffering of the sugarcane farmers. And Mr. Speaker, as I speak here today, this is not the first time that a motion or a bill about the sugar and sugarcane farming has come in this House. We have had numerous motions. We have had bills. We have had laws enacted in this country to manage the sugar industry. But nothing seems to be working. When you go in the government shelves, motions, bills, laws, regulations are gathering dust. Nobody seems to be paying attention to the farmers, the sugarcane farmers. And that has actually led some of us as leaders to be in a very awkward position because we need to help the farmers. But the farmers, we don't get any assistance from the government. Mr. Speaker, as one of the speakers said, if we don't do something now, then we have to forget about the sugarcane industry. It is going to collapse totally in the next very few years. Because the factories that we have, like Mumias Sugar Factory, there is a glimpse of hope that someone is trying to revive. But the reason why our sugar cannot competitively compete in the market today is because our production is we still use very obsolete equipment to produce sugar. Nowadays, with the Chinese, Japanese, and European equipments, they are as small as this desk. But the obsolete equipment that we have in Mumias Sugar, one boiler is the size of the entire parliament. And that thing consumes electricity 100 times more than the modern equipment. So however much we try, we cannot produce sugar that is competitive in our modern market. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I would like to say, first, I thank the House, I thank the members for the support they have given this motion. And I hope the government will put into consideration all the sentiments by the members of parliament and more so members who are really concerned about the sugarcane industry, the poverty that is killing the sugarcane farmers. It is time that we have to take action. We cannot continue talking about the sugarcane industry, the fail of the sugarcane industry, reviving the sugarcane industry. Mr. Speaker, we have talked about this thing for the last 30 years, but it seems we are not moving anywhere. It is now time the government has to be serious enough, look at the farmers and take the farmers seriously and empower them and let them benefit from sugarcane farming and sugarcane production. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I beg to move. And before I sit down, I put standing order 53-3, where I request the chair to defer the putting of this question to the next sitting as will be scheduled by the House Business Committee. Thank you.
Well said, and thank you so much. The decision on this motion, as requested by the honorable member, will be made the next time the motion is slated for a decision in the order paper. Before we go to the next motion, members, join me in welcoming students from Savelberg Primary School, Kajiado Central in Kajiado County, students from Mirema Academy, Kasarani, Nairobi County. They're in the public gallery and they're welcome to follow proceedings this morning and to Parliament. Next order.
Order number 9, motion number 6 of 2024, comprehensive reform of the education bursary schemes to ensure free basic education in Kenya.
Honorable Esther Passaris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move the following motion: that aware that Article 43(1), as read together with Article 53(1)(b) of the Constitution, provides that every person has the right to education and enshrines the right of every child to free, compulsory, basic education. Further aware that Kenya's Vision 2030 identifies education as a crucial component for transforming the country into a globally competitive nation, appreciating that bursaries play a vital role in supplementing funding for enhancing access to education, particularly for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and contributes to the realization of universal basic education, noting that various education bursaries exist in the country, including ward-based level bursaries, county government's bursary, National Government Constituency Development Fund, the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, and the Presidential Secondary School bursaries, further noting that the evolution of bursary schemes from centralized to community-based administrations aimed to enhance education access, equity, and responsiveness to local needs, concerned that despite these efforts, the current bursary systems faces numerous challenges, including lack of standardized and transparent selection criteria, delay in disbursement of funds, and insufficient coverage of education costs, leading to gaps in support. Further concerned that these challenges have resulted in persistent disparities in education access, increased dropout rates, particularly in secondary schools, due to financial constraints and strains on household incomes as families struggle to meet educational expenses not covered by bursaries. Acknowledging that the implementation of community-based bursary schemes has not fully achieved its intended objective, hence the need to re-evaluate the current bursary system with a view to ensure equitable and free access to quality education for all students, cognizant that the duty of the government to provide free basic education can best be achieved by consolidating education funds and directly remitting to public schools, Now, therefore, this House urges that the government, through the Ministry of Education, in collaboration with the relevant stakeholders, undertakes a comprehensive overhaul of the education bursary system with a view to collapse all bursary schemes and allocate the funds to the State Department of Education for provision of basic education through capitation to be directly remitted to the schools. Honorable Speaker, Article 43(1) F, every person has the right to education. Article 53(1), every child has the right to free, compulsory, basic education. I want to underscore the word compulsory. That means no child should be out of school. And as we talk today, so many children are out of school because they have not been able to pay their school fees, and the schools are sending them home, including Form 4 leavers. Yesterday, I dealt with a case in my county where a student was sent home by the school, and the student is in Form 4, and the reason he's sent home because the student owes, the parents of the student owes 130,000 to the school. Now, this parent is a mama fua. She cannot afford the 130. And the school felt, even though it's 2 months to the exams, that let's send her home, put pressure on the mother. You cannot get water out of a stone. There is no way that Mama Fua, who I spoke to yesterday, and she told me that, you know what, I'm not even staying in my own house. It's been locked because I can't pay rent. She's not able to get enough jobs. So the Constitution establishes education as a fundamental right to individuals, for individuals' development in the nation's future. So this child, I want to paint a picture here, what's happening to this child. All the bursaries, the mother received 5,000 from the Langata Member of Parliament, Honorable Jalango. The mother is going to receive now, because she came to my awareness, 53,000 were put on the full scholarship that we give quite a few students. As NGAF, we only get 1.9 million shillings per constituency per year. MPs can spend anything between 50 million and 70 million. The problem we're having right now is that our bursaries individually, okay, cannot ensure that all the students in our respective wards, constituencies, or counties can actually have that compulsory education that is within their right in the Constitution. So we're actually not living to the mandate of the Constitution. And I know it's going to cost a lot of money, but if we scrap out corruption, right, we should be able to ensure that Vision 2030, right, will be attained. All students in Kenya will achieve that basic education from ECD, primary, junior secondary, and secondary. And then help will kick in. But if we don't do this, then we're going to end up with a situation that is going to actually fail us as a country. We have so many young children right now loitering in the various estates because they cannot go to school. Some of them are in jail because they end up committing crimes. So we are failing the citizens of this country by not having education, the free basic education. Now, some students will make it, and those students who make it will end up going to university. Help will kick in. After we finish with free basic compulsory education, we then need to look at how we're going to handle TVET, because not all students will go to university, but one step at a time. We need to actually start this movement where we as MPs and leaders, with the various funds that we have, agree that we need to actually push the Ministry of Education oversight, provide the budget so the Ministry of Education can provide free secondary education. What do I mean by free secondary education? I don't mean that we only provide the fees. You know, high school is currently free, all right? It's boarding schools that you pay anything from 40,000 to 79,000, all right? But the thing is, when I say free, I mean we have to provide the uniforms. We have to provide the books. We have to provide the teachers. We have to provide the sporting, the money that they need to go out for activities. I went to a primary school recently, and one of the students that I had taken to school, the reason they didn't go to school is because they didn't have uniform. I bought them the uniform, I took them to the primary school, and Their school had just gone on a trip. It was a geography learning trip. That student and many other students whose parents could not afford 2,000 shillings could not go on those trips. I recall in my childhood days when I used to go on school trips, there was no segregation, there was no discrimination. Whether you had money or not, the school provided the trip for you. So today we are doing something wrong. We are actually making parents and children grow up with very low self-esteem. The mother yesterday called me and told me, I am actually depressed. I'm in town with my child. Can you imagine what was going through that child's mind? That my mother is walking around from one Mheshimiwa's office to another, begging for my fees so I can go back and sit for my exams. That child is actually going to be demoralized. That child is going to be messed up emotionally. And I feel that we need to do something about that. There is also a lack of standardized criteria, the lack of uniform selection. I mean, how do we decide who requires the bursaries? I think we really need to make sure that it's free for all so that we don't have inequality, we don't have favoritism, and we don't have inefficiency in awarding the funds. And also, every MP, even the MP who puts the maximum from his NGCDF, 70 million to giving out bursaries, he's still not reaching everyone. And not every child that he gives 5, 10, 15,000 is actually going to complete school. That child is going to drop out of school because if he's in a boarding school, he requires 53,000. You give him 15,000, which is the highest ceiling, he's still going to be sent home. And then we are spending so much money on education. We give over 600 or 700 billion to the Ministry of Education. We give so much money for the teachers. And then we are sending these children home and the quality of education is going down. When I talk about the quality of education, right, when the school is performing bad, it's because half the time the student is actually sent home. In a year, the student spends 1 term at home. Can you imagine what is happening? This is when we end up with teenage pregnancies. This is when we end up with taking drugs because the mother now goes to work. The child is left unattended at home. We really need to become serious about free, basic, compulsory education. You can't even tell the chief, go pick up the children that haven't reported to school from transitioning from primary to secondary, go and take them to school. Which school is he going to take them? No uniform. First of all, uniform for me is overrated. It's still a very colonial thing. Government has got NYS. Why can't we provide standardized uniform for children, cheap, affordable for the government, and provide it free for the children? How many times do I go to school and I see a young girl whose low self-esteem, besides being sent home, is wearing torn clothes? Really faded torn clothes. Can you imagine the stigma that that child is going through? So why can't we provide that basic school uniform? Provide the books. And then, you know, when it comes to the ministry, I mean, I am very, 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 very proud of the choice that the president made in CS Julius Migos Ogamba as the CS for Education. I have interacted with him. He has been to Parliament to answer questions. He's hands-on, he gets it. I actually talked to him this morning and I said, besides giving you the money and making sure you get the capitation to the schools, the order and the system of capitation also has to be managed. Because if we amalgamate our bursaries, it might be about 60, 70 billion. It's really 10% of what he's getting right now. But what we are saying is we want the government to provide free, basic, compulsory education. No child should be at home. Build more and more secondary schools. Make sure that if we say it's free education tomorrow, we will end up having to build extra classrooms. When we need more classrooms, we build classrooms based on one man, one shilling. Because what's going to happen is you'll have certain constituencies where the schools are overwhelmed. They'll need more classrooms. Let's have makeshift tents. Let's hire the teachers. Let's make sure. And then you know what? The government is going to have to come back and say, you know what, to do this, to the citizens. To do this, we need to collect this much money. But before the government asks for money from the citizens, right, they need to show us accountability for what they're getting. I know that to provide free basic education, we will need probably $1 trillion plus. But the thing is, when we give that $1 trillion plus to the schools, are we getting the schools to actually perform? Are we devolving corruption even to the schools? I've heard people say that even within the various funds, there is corruption. I think we have to really have a moral reflection as a country, as leaders and as parents. Because it's not just the leaders who are corrupt. Also, you have parents who are corrupt. You have citizens who are corrupt. And it's a chain reaction for everything that is going on in this country. So what we have to do is to ensure that we collect the resources and then we disperse the resources, because the delays of resources, if we say that the government is going to give the capitation, if the government doesn't send the capitation on time, doesn't send the correct amount of capitation, then what will happen is the schools are going to be auctioned, because some of the schools right now have a lot of money that they owe. So we need to basically have an audit done about what would it cost to have complete free education. Now, I know that we have free education, but there are so many hidden costs. The hidden costs come in the uniforms, which are very expensive, and it's a cartel and a racket in itself. The hidden cost comes in the school board of management and parents association asking for money from the parents. The hidden cost comes in the feeding programs. Dishina County in Nairobi is working for primary schools. We should also make it work for secondary school. We should also make sure that it's fortified and it has a variety. I've heard students also complain, because even if we're giving something for free, we have to give something that is of quality. Student wants variety. I've heard Nairobi students asking for chapati, not rice and dengu and beans every day. So when I speak about amalgamation of all the bursaries, I'm not speaking only about us, because we know that that's not going to be enough. But as leaders, if we make the first step and say, you know what, we're not going to get involved in bursaries, but then we oversight the ministry, then we provide the resources, then we go to our constituents and we talk to them about the need to actually have money for education. We've put money for housing as a housing levy. Should we think in future about an education levy where money is collected specifically for education, where parents will actually be able to say, you know what, we're not going to oppose this, because this education levy is going to ensure that my child goes to school from ECD all the way to secondary. Then in the end, they get into HELP and they get the funding model where they'll get the loans. Honorable Speaker, when we merge all these bursary schemes into a single fund managed by the State Department of Education, this consolidation will eliminate duplication and ensure standardization and increase efficiency in the fund management. When I say duplication, what do I mean? There are people who know how to apply for bursaries. And those people who know how to apply for bursaries will go from the ward to the MP to the woman rep. You know, they'll go everywhere. But there are many who don't know. Like the lady yesterday who finally managed to reach me. But even if she had reached me, the funds was not enough. So we're discriminating, because why should one child get it and not another? So why don't we as leaders fight for free, basic, compulsory education? Give up this fund, which is actually causing us not to oversight the Ministry of Education properly. Let us look at let the ministry come back and give us an answer. This is a step in the right direction. Give us an answer as to how much money do we need to fund education. We have development partners. We've got private sector partners. You know, we've got the Wings to Fly. We've got so many people, MasterCard, so many people funding education. Can we pool all those resources and ensure that every child in Kenya, and a child, I'm talking about children up to secondary, goes for free? And when it comes to boarding, I mean, it's so disheartening to see children walking with mattresses, walking with big boxes, going to boarding school. Let's equip the boarding schools. Let them show up to school to learn. And let's give them all those facilities in the school. What will it cost for us to do that? Let's have an audit. Let's start the process so that we can ensure that we actually live up to the promises that were asked for by Kenyans enshrined in our constitution. Honorable Speaker, these reforms will ensure that every student, irregardless of their social economic background, have equitable access to quality education. Funds will reach those who need them without delay or discrimination, without mothers and fathers having to tarmac, without children having to be sent home from school. Honorable Speaker, by covering all costs associated with basic education, the reforms will reduce the dropout rates in secondary school, enabling more students to complete their studies. In addition, families will be relieved by the burden of struggling to cover school costs, not currently covered by bursaries such as exam fees, uniforms, materials, promoting financial stability at the household level. Honorable Speaker, allow me to emphasize that providing free basic education is the responsibility of the government, is a responsibility that the government must uphold. Reforming the bursary system is not just a policy change, it is a moral and constitutional obligation to ensure that no child is denied the opportunity to learn due to being marginalized. I therefore urge that the Ministry of Education, in collaboration with all relevant stakeholders, undertake this comprehensive overhaul and implement the new system to provide free basic education for all. As I conclude, I reiterate that this motion is about ensuring the government fulfills its constitutional duty to provide free and compulsory education to every child in Kenya. Picture a young student in the informal settlements or a rural village whose dream for education is currently threatened by financial barriers. This reform, by consolidating bursary schemes and directly funding schools, will lift the burden and ensure that no child is left behind simply because of lack of resources. I'm aware that the Speaker engaged the Ministry of Education through the clerk to provide us with information that will birth a legislative proposal to address this issue. Equally, the Constitutional Court sitting in Nakuru directed that there is a need to consolidate bursaries. Honorable Speaker, this reform will lay the foundation for an equitable education system, one that not only opens doors for these young minds, but also builds a future where education empowers entire generations. As we secure their access to learning, we are also securing Kenya's social and economic development, creating a nation where every child can fulfill their potential. I have to end by saying that 70% of the students
my colleagues will support, that if all our students will have access, today I will tell you, for example, in my constituency, I get about 21,000 applications for bursary. Only about 9,000 of them benefit from it. And even the 9 that benefit partially. They get between 5 to 10,000, sometimes 15,000. The ones that go on the scholarship program are very few. Of the 9,000, it's just because I've tried to balance to ensure that at least in every household, I have one benefiting. But it is such a small amount. For families that are coming from low-income areas, it is not adequate. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, this motion presents a transformative steps towards improving access to quality education in our country. The challenges of inequity, inefficiency, and insufficient funding can no longer be ignored. By adopting this motion, we will be consolidating our efforts to provide a fair, transparent, and effective system of support for all students, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds. I fully support the proposal to collapse the bursary schemes into a single centralized funds to be directly remitted to schools. It is only by taking such a bold and decisive step that we can ensure the full realization of every child's right to education and make Kenya a truly equitable and prosperous nation. Madam Speaker, let me add that by saying that we collapse all the bursary schemes into one, the rider is that we are doing this, we are proposing to do this as a first step towards offering real free primary and secondary and even tertiary education for free to all our students. The reason why members of parliament have continued to champion that bursaries be administered through NGCDF is to address the gap that many students were missing out. But if we can be able to consolidate this, and the government agrees that we are moving towards a free provision of basic education, it will be a step in the right direction. I want to also take this opportunity to commend actually the government for an attempt at proper investment. This, for example, the last financial year, we have invested over 640 billion in the Ministry of Education. If we collapse all this, and it is this house, and I want to challenge my colleague members, that this is a budget-making house. If we truly want education to be free in this country, the power is with us. The power is with us in this house. We can remove funds from where we think it is not necessary. We can continue to cut budgets from all other sectors that are not as critical as education, which is a basic human right, and we allocate the Ministry of Education the funds that are adequate for it to provide education. We will not be having all these challenges we are seeing today with the new university funding model, students on the streets, and now their own teachers on the streets. I want to also add, Madam Speaker, that free education is not only school fees, it's not only uniforms, it's not only books, but also adequate teachers. Today, if you look at the JS, which is a junior secondary, in most parts of this country, you have maybe one teacher or two in a school with students who are supposed to be examined in about 13 or more areas. Those two teachers, some of them are Swahili teachers. We're expecting them to train our students on mathematics and sciences. It's just not possible. So when we are talking about free education, we are talking about a comprehensive nature, whereby we have adequate teachers, we have adequate infrastructure, we have, they are facilitated in school to ensure that our students get quality education. So that, because if we don't do it, it is just a time bomb. With those very many remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to second.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nyamita. Honorable members, I propose the question that aware that Article 43(1), as read together with Article 51(b) of the Constitution, provides that every person has a right to education and enshrines the right of every child to free and compulsory education. Further aware that Kenya Vision 2030 identifies education as a critical component for transforming the country into a global competitive nation. Appreciating that bursaries play a vital role in supplementing funding for enhancing access to education, particularly for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and contribute to the realization of universal health, basic education. noting that various education bursaries exist in the country, including ward-level bursary, county government bursary, national government constituencies bursary, I'll take that, National Government Constituencies Development Fund, NGCDF, the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, NGAF, and the Presidential Secondary School Bursary, PSSB. Further noting that evolution of bursary schemes from centralized to community-based administration aimed to enhance education access, equality, and responsiveness to local needs, concerned that despite these efforts, the current bursary system faces numerous challenges, including lack of standardization and transparent selection criteria, delay in disbursement of funds, and insufficient coverage of education costs, leading to gaps in support. Further, concerned that these challenges have resulted in persistent disparities in education access, increased dropout rates, particularly in secondary schools, due to financial constraints and strain on household incomes as families struggle to meet education expenses not covered by bursaries, acknowledging that implementation of community-based bursary schemes has not fully achieved its intended objective, hence the need to reevaluate the current bursary system with a view to ensure equitable and free access to quality education for all students, cognizant that, that the duty of the government is to provide free education can best be achieved by consolidating education fund and directly remitting to public schools. Now, therefore, this House urges the government through the Ministry of Education in collaboration with the relevant stakeholders undertakes a comprehensive overhaul of the education bursary system with a view to collapsing all bursary schemes and allocating the fund to the State Department of Basic Education for provision of free basic education through capitation to be directly remitted to schools. Yes, Honorable Kiaria, what is out of order?
Madam Speaker, for sure nothing is out of order because the chair can never be out of order. I'm rising on standing order number 97, and I'm cognizant of how important the motion that has been brought here by the county MP for Nairobi is. And you can see, even tell from the interest that on a Wednesday morning, members have filled the chairs and the benches in the House to debate this motion. Madam Speaker, my concern is on the time we have to debate this. And I'm standing on standing order number 97, which provides that this House can decide to limit the time of debate. And in this case, I'm proposing that we can limit the time of debate from 10 minutes to around 5 minutes, so that as many members can get the time and opportunity to debate this most important motion, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I'm just requesting that you find out from the House whether we would agree to limit the time to around 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable KJ. Honorable members, at the moment I have 17 requests, and I'm sure each one of you would like to debate this subject. So I would like to find out whether it is the mood of the House that we reduce from 10 minutes to 5 minutes for this. Yes, indeed it is. And we now proceed with debate. The first opportunity will go to the Honorable Timothy Wanyonyi, member for Westlands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, to contribute this motion. Madam Speaker, this is a very critical motion brought by my county women rep, Mrs. Esther Passaris, Honorable Esther Passaris. Madam Speaker, bursary is a lifeline to our education.
Order, Honorable Member for Westlands. Honorable members, this morning at the public gallery, we have schools that have visited the National Assembly. We have Aga Khan Academy, Nairobi, Westlands constituency, Nairobi County. And we have Nzeluni primary and junior secondary from Mwingi West in Kitui County. I was saying this so that we can give the honorable member for Westlands, as you debate on this subject, you may kindly welcome the students on behalf of the House. Please give the mic to the Honorable Wanyonyi. Give the microphone to the
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would like to, on behalf of all the members of this House, to welcome the students from Akakana Academy. And this is a school in my constituency, Madam Speaker. And I would like to encourage them to follow the proceedings of the House and also learn how Parliament functions, because I know these are the leaders that we are preparing, Madam Speaker, to take over from us. And this is the House of Parliament, the National Assembly. Welcome and feel free, enjoy, ask as many questions from the staff of Parliament who are with you, what you want to know, so that when you go away, know that we are here to support you and make sure that schools function. Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity. Madam Speaker, as we debate this motion on the bursaries, Madam Speaker, I remember a long time ago, there were government bursaries and they were enshrined in secrecy because during our time in school, the people who used to get bursaries, I think they were coming from the office of the president. I don't know whether it was Minister of Education, but mostly from the president. And Madam Speaker, along the time, things have happened. We have come with the devolution, CDF came, and many other things, Madam Speaker. We are trying as much as we can, Madam Speaker, to devolve functions from the national government as far as to the smallest unit in the administrative system, Madam Speaker, and that is at the ward level, from the constituency to the ward level, Madam Speaker, so that these funds are more accessible to people, Madam Speaker, so that people can benefit more from the county, from the constituency, and from the presidential fund, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker, all these things happen around the constituency. And I know most of these, especially the NGCDF, Madam Speaker, the bursaries through NGCDF, I know it is functioning and is working very well. There are many, many other bursaries, and this is to the advantage of the children and the parents of this country, Madam Speaker. What we are looking is that we put more money in these bursaries so that we can move and add more money. Madam Speaker, under the PBI, we had proposed that we increase from 2.5% allocation of the funds to the CDF to 5%. And that will mean that we can give school fees, Madam Speaker, to children. We can pay full school fees, or we can give a minimum of 20,000 to a student, Madam Speaker. And that can make sure that that student, especially those who are in day school, if you pay 20,000, Madam Speaker, you'll have paid almost the full amount of the school fees for the whole year. So we are feeling, we know that, Madam Speaker, the intention of the mover of this motion, Madam Speaker, is to get efficiency and make sure that there's enough money for bursaries, to cater for school fees for children, and many other things, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, I am very concerned about centralizing the fund or collapsing these all other bursaries into one. Madam Speaker, I don't know if it's going to create efficiency when we bring it under one center. It's going to create more problems because we have, look at the help, the students at the higher education, Madam Speaker, at the university, accessing help is a big problem. But when we come to accessing bursaries through the NGCDF or at the ward level or even at NGAF, Madam Speaker, it's much easier because you know where these offices are, and we know that we move and go and issue bursaries outside there, Madam Speaker, in the open, and people are very happy with it. I'm very sure that what the intention of Mheshimiwa Esther Basaris is to create efficiency in the issuance of the of bursaries and increasing money in the issuance, Madam Speaker. But I have an issue and a problem with centralizing or collapsing all these bursaries in one. Let us leave them the way they are, but collapsing all these bursaries in one. Let us leave them the way they are, but collapsing all these bursaries in one. Let us leave them the way they are, but